We're about to dive into a method, a philosophy really, that didn't just design cool products. It literally architected the way we all interact with the modern world. It's a story that's not about adding more, but about taking things away. It's about this quiet, almost obsessive pursuit of perfection that changed absolutely everything. This is the story of the Ive Method.
He realized that the only way to save a multi-billion-dollar company from bankruptcy wasn't to add more buttons and more power, but to have the courage to take everything away. That one thought, right there, that single moment of just radical clarity from Jony Ive, that's the key. That's the key to understanding one of the most influential designers of our lifetime. Everything else, and I mean everything, flows from that one idea.
So, our story kicks off in 1997. And you have to understand, Apple is on the verge of total collapse. The company is just hemorrhaging money. Their product line is a confusing mess, and the prevailing wisdom in Silicon Valley is, well, it's to fight fire with more fire. More features, more power, more of everything. But there was one guy working away in a pretty secluded studio who had a totally different, almost heretical idea. And this slide really just lays out the two warring ideas of that time. On one side, you've got the entire tech industry in 97. The so-called experts were all fighting what you could call the spec sheet wars. Building these beige gray plastic towers that honestly looked more like filing cabinets. Success was just a long list of specs, more buttons, more ports, more power. It was a race to see who could look the most complex. And then on the other side, there's Jony Ive, holding a foam model that looked like a translucent jelly bean. His method wasn't about adding. It was about finding the very soul of the machine, its humanity, by being brave enough to strip everything else away. This wasn't just a different look. It was a completely different belief system, one built on just disciplined care. And that's the key strategic shift. This wasn't just about making things look clean and pretty. No, Ive made a very conscious decision to weaponize minimalism. He realized that the ultimate authority in a product isn't hidden in a spec sheet. It's found in the person who has the most disciplined, almost obsessive control over the care of that object. He figured out that his attention to detail wasn't some soft skill. It was his most lethal professional weapon. But this conviction, this courage, it didn't just pop up out of nowhere in 1997. Oh no, it was forged. So how in the world does a philosophy like this get formed? To really get the Ive method, you have to get the man. His worldview wasn't cooked up in some Cupertino boardroom. It was forged in the quiet isolation of workshops, on failed projects, and in the soul-crushing reality of having to compromise your vision. This timeline kind of traces that whole path for us. It starts way back in his father's silversmith workshop, a place where he learned that craft isn't just a feeling, it's a documented, rigorous standard. Then came the reality check of the corporate world, the crushing rejection of his beautiful toilet and sink design, which a client called too modern, because they just couldn't see past the status quo. That experience pushed him to Apple, but not to immediate stardom. He worked pretty much in isolation on the failed but super ambitious Newton project. And then came the 1997 meeting with a returning Steve Jobs. This was it. This was his one shot. He knew if he failed here, his entire vision for design would be buried, probably forever. And all that isolation, it became his forge. While the rest of the world was chasing clutter, status, and whatever was fashionable that week, Ive, who was an outsider even inside Apple, he built this internal fortress. His value system wasn't based on what was popular. It was based on the purity of the material, on authenticity, on pure logic. He systematically unlearned the need to seek status, figuring out that in the hunt for real impact, your own restraint is the only thing that doesn't lie. He was building a foundation for what he called inconspicuous excellence. And out of that friction, out of all those years of artistic rejection and professional isolation, this intellectual core of his work emerged, the philosophy of inevitability. This is where we get to the why behind all those iconic designs, the deep thinking that came way before any sketch or model. This was his golden rule. Good design is when it seems inevitable. I mean, just think about that for a second. It's a complete rejection of the designer's ego. It's not about an artist splashing their signature style all over something. No, it's about getting yourself out of the way so that the object itself feels so right, so logical, that it's like it couldn't possibly exist in any other way. Okay, so the first pillar here is mechanical honesty. Now, this isn't just about being simple. It's a deep strategic process. It's about staying in the silence, resisting that urge to add stuff or decorate, until the object's core function is just undeniable. The material and the purpose, they dictate the form. Think about the original iPod's click wheel. In a world of tiny, confusing buttons, the click wheel was mechanically honest. Its job, scrolling through a massive list, was perfectly expressed through a single continuous physical motion. It was just undeniable. And the second pillar is radical care. Now, care sounds, soft, but for Ive, it was a weapon. It was a disciplined belief that your work is only as good as the amount of disrespect you remove from it. Every unnecessary line, every confusing button, every poorly fitting seam, to him, that's disrespect to the user. Radical care is the tough, systematic process of hunting down and eliminating every single trace of that carelessness. It's why the seam on a MacBook feels like it's not even there, and why the original iPhone had one button, not 12. This really shows how he put it all together. His famous, super secretive design studio, it wasn't for styling products like some fashion house. No way. It was a clean room, a systematic laboratory for discovering the truth of an object. A place where ideas were tested against the tough, unforgiving laws of material and function, not against what was trending that week. But hey, a philosophy is just an idea unless you have a system to make it real.
So, how did he actually turn these abstract ideas like inevitability and radical care into tangible, world-changing products? Well, he built a system, a set of daily habits and rituals designed to enforce his philosophy and just relentlessly filter out all the noise. 100. What does this number mean? It's not just some random figure. It represents one of the core, almost mythical habits in his system for finding the truth. 100 is roughly the number of foam models his team would build for just a single product component, like the curve on the corner of a phone. He refused to accept a finished sketch on a computer screen. Why? Because a sketch is just an idea, but a physical model. That's a reality you can argue with. He needed to hold it, to feel it. He was trying to force a physical reaction of tactile clarity, searching for that feeling of inevitability, not with his eyes, but with his hands. This is iterative prototyping taken to its absolute extreme, a belief that the answer is in the physical world, not the digital one.
This slide breaks down another one of his core habits, the material audit. This was his whole process for understanding a material so deeply that it could be used honestly. First, analyze surface sovereignty, which basically means the surface of the product has to be pure and true to the material itself. This principle led directly to the unibody MacBook, which was carved from a single block of aluminum, not pieced together from plastic bits pretending to be metal. Second, study technical limitations. He'd obsessively learn from other industries, like Japanese metalworking or even candy manufacturing, to understand exactly what was possible, and then push those boundaries in mass production. Third, dismantle competitor noise. He systematically refused to follow trends or add features just because his rivals did. It's why early iPhones were missing features others had. They weren't essential to the core vision. And finally, enforce foundational restraint. This was the habit of constantly asking, do we really need this, at every single stage?
So all these habits, the hundreds of foam models, the material audits, they all formed a larger behavioral pattern, systematic refinement. The idea here is that the entire creative process is a high-performance lab. Every single decision, every line, every curve placed on an object is treated as a direct threat to carelessness. Nothing is accidental. Everything is intentional, refined and distilled down to its absolute purest form.
And the payoff for all this incredible discipline? Well, it was a total transformation of our entire culture's relationship with technology. He went from being a silversmith's son to the quiet architect of our modern digital world, proving that simplicity isn't the absence of clutter, it's the mastery of complexity.
His legacy is just immense. He completely destroyed the myth that complex somehow equals smart. He proved that having the courage to remove everything that isn't the vision is a powerful structural weapon in business. And let's be real, through this whole process, he took a simple glass rectangle and made it arguably the most important, most desired object on Earth, changing photography, communication, even fashion forever. And in doing that, he replaced an entire industry's focus on noise and features with a new gold standard: unvarnished, unapologetic care.
And that's where the story stops being about him. It starts being about you. Because the Ive Method isn't just about designing technology. It's a blueprint for anyone who feels overwhelmed by the noise in their own work, in their own life. It's a guide to finding your power in subtraction. The ultimate takeaway is this: your real power isn't in adding more or looking busy or decorating your work to make it seem important. Your power is tied directly to your ability to stop decorating and start distilling, to get to the absolute, undeniable essence of what you're trying to do. You are more than just a person doing a job, you are a builder of inevitability in your own field. So I want to leave you with this question. Just think about an area of your work or even your life that feels cluttered, complicated, or just stuck. What would actually happen if you committed so deeply to the core vision that you had the courage to remove all the noise, the distractions, the unnecessary meetings, the projects you're only half invested in? What essential truth would be left? You know, when you raise your level of care, you stop being a victim of how things are, and you start becoming the master of the outcome. Remember this, simplicity is never the default. It is always a choice. And the level of care you bring to making that choice, well, that is the code for your greatness.